Welcome to my review of the Evan-Moor Daily Geography Practice Workbooks. I am Leslie Maddox. I'm an engineer turned homeschool mom to 3 little boys. My 3 boys are currently finishing up 6th grade, 3rd grade, and 1st grade, and this is the end of our 6th year of homeschooling. If you're interested in keeping in touch with me, here's my contact information. I'm on Instagram. I have a Facebook page, YouTube, of course, and you also see the URL to my website. So I would love to connect with you in any one of those ways. Okay, today we're going to be talking about the Evan-Moor Daily Geography Practice Workbooks. It's based on the 18 National Geography Standards, like whatever that means. It sounds good. I can tell you from using it, I've used it a couple of different years with various grades, and it's pretty comprehensive, so I totally believe this. See what else. There are 36 lessons. The workbooks I saw have 36 lessons in them. The way it works is that a lesson is intended to be per week. So you have questions for Monday through Friday. You have 10 questions each week plus a challenge question. The 10 questions are split up 2 questions per day. So Monday, and it's labeled Monday. You have 2 questions. Tuesday, another 2 questions. Wednesday, another 2 questions. All of the questions are, the student answers them by looking at the map for that week. There's a new map with each question, and each lesson, I believe, covers a different standard. So there's a new kind of mapping skill that they're learning that the parent introduces or the teacher introduces to them at the beginning of the week or at the beginning of the lesson. So that's how it's split up. Okay, so the focus is mapping skills. You know, when homeschool parents look at covering geography, the big question is, what exactly do you want to cover for geography? For some people, that means landforms and waterways, kind of geographic features. For some people, that means memorizing the 50 states where they all are and drawing a map of the United States if you're in the US. For some people, that means learning mapping skills. So just so you know, this workbook is all about learning mapping skills. There is some talk about landforms and waterways in it, of course. I mean, if you're looking at maps, that's obviously going to be a factor that you need to consider, especially when the students are looking at physical maps. But in general, it's mapping skills, different types of maps, how to use a map, how to read a map, that kind of thing. Now, the maps that are used will cover, like for the United States workbooks, it will cover different regions of the United States as well as the world. It will cover like weather in the United States depending on the grade level. So it'll cover a lot of different things, but in general, I would say it's mapping skills is the main point of the book. There is some geography vocabulary, which I think I'll talk about more later. I think the vocabulary, it's up to the teacher to decide how they want to how much they want to focus on it. I haven't focused on it a lot. Next time I use these workbooks, I probably will focus on it more, but it is there in the teacher's manual for you to reference and make use of. Another point, that these workbooks, they're intended for a traditional classroom setting. And it's very obvious when you read the teacher's manual that that's the intended audience. A traditional classroom, like public school, private school, they're not written for the homeschool parent. So that's why it gets kind of a little dicey in how you use it, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. All right, so what should you purchase if you're going to consider using this? The one thing I would say is necessary is the teacher's manual. Now, the teacher's manual has background information. There's a teacher page for every lesson, each of the 36 lessons. So there's going to be 36 teacher pages, one for each lesson. And the teacher page has on it background information for the map or the mapping skill, the geography skill that's being taught in that lesson. I use it kind of as a script. So at the beginning of the lesson, it's good to sit down with your student or students and go over this background information. They're going to need that for answering some of the questions. There's an answer key for the maps, which you may think, these are simple enough. I can just look at the map myself and look at the answer real quick. And a lot of times you can, but especially if you have multiple students, it gets old sometimes. Yeah, you could think it through and answer the questions yourself, but sometimes it's easier just to look at the answer key, right? And also sometimes it's not always exactly obvious what answer is correct. So the answer key is really helpful. And there are also reproducible student pages. Okay, so the teacher's manual, the way it's set up is you have for each lesson, it shows you the teacher page, the map for that lesson, and then the student pages. And then you could make copies of the map and the student pages. You can imagine how tedious that might get if you're doing it for 36 lessons. So that's, multiply that by 3, and you got a lot of copying that you got to do. For that reason, I like to get the ebook. There is an ebook of the teacher's manual. It's much easier to just print out the student pages than it is to sit at the copy machine and make those copies. So much easier. So I like using the ebook. That's a separate purchase from the physical teacher's manual. There's also a student practice book that you can get, which just has the student question pages and the map pages. And I've never used that actually. I probably would next time around, because even though printing out the student pages from the ebook is much more convenient than standing at the copy machine and copying the physical pages from a physical teacher's manual, even though the ebook is easier in that way, it's still tedious because you can't just say, let me print out all these pages. You have to go and select which pages. They're not all together. The teacher's pages are interspersed in with the student pages. I wish that were different. Wish that were set up a little bit different. But it is what it is. So the student practice book may be a huge time saver in that way, even if you decide to take it apart for prepping for the school year. I do for my students, I like to print it out from the ebook, and then that way I can print out just the map page by itself with nothing on the other side, and then I print the question pages. It's two-sided, so I print that front and back, and then when I put it in their binder, I hole punch the map page so it's facing the question pages. So it's just a little bit easier for my students to use. And I'm not sure how the student practice book is set up, the physical book. If I know that the map pages are all together, like at the back of the book, so they'd have to kind of flip back and forth. And so I'm not sure how easy that would be to use. But if you take it apart, you could probably do it whatever you want. All right, what else? So additional purchases to go along with the actual curriculum. You're probably gonna need a globe. I mean, you can get away without it, but it's nice, especially if you have students who learn well from touching things and just that interactive aspect of it. So if you have like an interactive learner or a physical learner, then the hands-on aspect of a globe may be really nice. So at the beginning of, I'm not sure if every grade level does this, but I know that in grade levels I've used, the beginning of it, it does talk about the globe, the difference between a globe and a flat map. So you may want to use a globe to point out some things on the globe and the differences. Also for the United States curriculum, I found it helpful to have a map of the actual United States, a political map with the boundaries of the states and the names of the states on it. There were times that my students needed to refer to it to see like what states are joining, like the area that they're looking at, to answer some questions. You could probably just print it out. What I have here this is actually a map that I'm using. It's just something I picked up a while ago at a teacher supply store or a homeschool store. So I put little magnets on it and hung it on our whiteboard, and so they can just grab it at any time. So that's what I already had. So that's what I'm using. You don't need this. You could probably just print out a map of the United States and have that in with their geography workbook, and then they have that at any time. Also, some crayons, colored pencils, markers, something to color with. Because there are times, I'm not sure about the older ages. I'm trying to remember if my sixth grader had to color anything. But I know in the younger grades, sometimes they have them color different regions of the map, different colors. I think, thinking back, I think my sixth grader did have to do this at some point. So just something colored to, some colors to mark up the map when they're directed, and which you probably already have on hand. And then for at least my sixth grader had to answer some questions that we needed to basically Google the answer. So supervised internet access, and they tell you like, and usually this is the challenge question, to look something up. Sometimes they direct you to a website like the Census Bureau, or to look up information about rivers. My son does have access to Britannica Kids online, and so he first tries to find the answer there. But there were times where I had to just sit with him to Google something, and so he could answer the questions. All right, what teacher prep is required? So yearly, you're going to want to determine how often your student's going to work in this workbook. So do you want to do it as designed, where they work in it, like answer 2 questions 5 days a week and progress through it that way? Or do you possibly want to do it all in one sitting? What are your plans? So for the younger grades, you could easily answer the 10 questions plus a challenge question all in one sitting very quickly. But it does get a little more difficult as time goes on, and so it just depends on how you want to use this, like how often do you want to do geography every week. Also, if you get the ebook, you will want to print and assemble that. And that takes a little bit longer than you think it's going to take. If all of the student pages were all together, then you could just say, hey, print out this document, or print from page this to page this. But that's not how it's set up, unfortunately. So it did take a little extra work to even just print out the student pages and then to assemble it. And then the teacher pages as well, if you want physical copies of those to be able to refer to as you're teaching. And then weekly, you will need to sit with your student to go over the background information for each lesson, to introduce the topic, and to do the teaching. I do teaching time with them just once a week, like on Mondays. That's when we start off the geography lesson, when they do the day 1, the Monday questions. And so before that, I sit with each of them and use that teacher page background information as a script. And we go over the vocabulary, and then I sit with them while they answer the Monday questions. And then after that, the rest of the week, they do that independently, and if they get something wrong after I check their work, then we talk about it again. So you can decide, do you want, there's that teaching time, obviously, which takes like 10 minutes, but you'll want to decide if you want to review the background information ahead of time. Honestly, I haven't really found a need to, but so that's up to you. Okay, how much time would your student take with this? So for the beginning of each lesson, that one-on-one teaching time I just talked about, where you're introducing the new lesson to the student, that takes about 10 minutes, if you do it right. If you really sit and discuss and pull up whatever information you need to, and sit and answer the questions and go over the vocabulary, if you do that, it takes about 10 minutes of teaching time. So each set of 2 daily questions, they're independent work basically for the rest of the week, take like 1 to 10 minutes. Sometimes it's real easy, like in less than a minute they can answer them. Sometimes it takes a little bit more work just because there's lots to write down, or they're having to think about it. So my estimate is about 10 minutes, but that's probably like on the outside, 10 minutes. And then the total time for each lesson, including all of the teaching time, the challenge question, the daily questions, it should be less than an hour for the week. So it's a pretty simple to implement, and it doesn't take a lot of time, but they are getting a lot out of it. Just because it's less than an hour a week doesn't mean that they're not learning a lot. I found that it's very comprehensive. They do learn a lot. So this is why I say that you may want to say, just do geography on Wednesdays or whatever, you block off an hour of time for an older student. For younger students, an hour will be too much. I try to limit lessons for anything to 20 minutes or less. So for each topic, that way they keep moving through and don't get too bored with it. For younger students especially, you look at their age, like a 6-year-old, their attention span is going to be about 6 minutes. So that's why, even though you could technically do this like in an hour, one day a week, in order to get a lot out of it, and not get bored with it and lose their just focus on it, I would say it's good to just keep it to those 2 questions per week, or 2 questions per day. And also I find that going back each day and doing a little bit of review of what they looked at in the past, that just helps to cement their learning. So how do I rate the Evan-Moor daily geography practice? And these are the criteria I look at for how I would rate it as far as homeschool curriculum goes. So is it written by experts? I rate this 5 stars because I'm assuming it is. I don't know that for sure, but since they're covering all those geography standards, I'm assuming it is. It's a curriculum company, Evan-Moor, that sells to school systems, and so I'm assuming here that they have all their ducks in a row, and it's, from what I've seen, is very well done. Includes planning suggestions. I rate this 4 stars because the way it's laid out with 2 questions per day, and each day is labeled Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's pretty obvious how they intend for it to be used. But because it's not targeted to homeschool families, it doesn't have suggested lesson plans like you might see in some curriculum, and different ways of using it for different types of schedules, or like using it for a 4-day-a-week schedule. So it doesn't have all that. I find that the way it's laid out, it's the intended use of it, it's very good. That's why I rate it 4 stars. But for the new homeschool parent who isn't comfortable changing things up, it would be nice if it had other suggested uses for the mapping pages and the questions. Does it teach how to use it? No, it doesn't, again, because it is targeted to school settings, like traditional school settings, where I believe this workbook is really intended to be as a supplement to whatever other social studies lessons that the teacher is teaching her classroom. It gives a little blurb at the beginning, but if you're wanting everything exactly laid out for you, like here's what a homeschool lesson would look like, it's not going to have that in there. Stepwise learning, does it teach like one thing at a time and focus on one skill at a time? Yes, it does. So I'm giving this 4 stars because it is stepwise learning as far as the geography standards go. I wish there was a little more integration from lesson to lesson with previous concepts. There is a little bit, there is some of that, but I don't know, I felt like it could be just a tad bit better, and I'm just thinking I'm being picky here. But I wouldn't say it's perfect, so that's why I didn't give it 5 stars. There's not a supplies list. Again, if you get curriculum targeted to homeschool parents, you're typically going to have a supplies list for what you need to teach it. This doesn't have that. It does mention, oh, you may want to use a globe and a map, and again, a little blurb about that, but there's not a, look, here's your supplies list. Here's what you need besides the basic curriculum. It doesn't have that. So that gets a 1 star for me, and it's a homeschool friendly. So I gave this a 3 because I have used it very effectively in my homeschool, and I think a lot of other moms have as well. But it doesn't have a whole lot of homeschool support in there. It doesn't have any homeschool support in there. It's adaptable to the homeschool setting from the traditional classroom setting. So that's why I give it 3 stars. So my overall rating would be about 3.5, which actually kind of surprised me, because my personal rating for it would be 5 stars. I really like this curriculum, and I think it's very comprehensive and very easy to use and easy to teach. So from like my point of view, just my personal feelings rating would be 5 stars. But considering all of the criteria I share with you, it comes to about 3.5 stars. Now, who would I recommend this to? Here you have my little chart. This is the learning preferences that I've talked about in other videos, my own little system I've come up with, where you look to see what learning methods does your student prefer, like what sparks their attentiveness, and then what's the best social setting for them. And this is going to be different from student to student. And so you see here that I would say if a student learns best from speaking the spoken word, like speaking words themselves, not just listening to a lecture, then this isn't the one for them. You could probably adapt it, tell them, read the questions out loud to yourself, or for a younger student, you can sit there and read the questions to them, and have them repeat back and answer to you verbally. So you could make it work that way, but that's not the way it's intended to use, but you can make it work if you needed to. Listening, again, same thing. If your student has trouble, if they're not a good reader and has trouble just reading instructions, like the questions on for each day, then you can sit there and read the question to them, and then they can write out the answer or speak it to you. So that just depends on how much time you want to spend on it. Do you want to spend that kind of time each day on geography? It's just a few minutes, but this kind of thing always ends up taking longer than you think it's going to take. And then when you have multiple students, and you know how things can get chaotic sometimes, it just becomes a hiccup. It can become laborious and an interruption to the school day if you have to sit and actually speak the questions to your student every time. So that's a maybe. That just depends on what you're willing to do, how you're willing to adapt this to your particular students. This works very well. It's a workbook, so it works very well for kids who like the written word. They're reading questions, they're writing the answers. The maps have that visual aspect, interactive. Yes, they're looking at the map and figuring things out from there. They're interacting with the information, and sometimes they're writing on the maps or coloring things. And if you have a student who likes to touch things, like I said about the globe, yes, this could work with them with liberal use of other resources. If you have like those scrunch maps of the United States, or a globe handy, or there's lots of fun little globes that you can get that are interactive where you touch things on them. So if you bring those kind of resources into your geography lessons, then this could work very well for your students. Now, I would say for students who like to work independently, they're the best fit for this, because at the beginning of the lesson, you will sit and teach them, but for the rest of the lesson, like the rest of the week, if they do the 2 questions per day, they can work on their own. So that will work very well for them. So if you have a student who really likes to be one-on-one, again, this might work if you're willing to sit with them for every day answering those questions. Or if they answer them all in one day, like for that hour, if you want to sit with them, then it could work. And if you want to teach multiple students, again, possibly they'd have to be similar ages, because I find that the lessons, like each grade level workbook is pretty grade level. It's on target for the grade level. So if you have, let's say, a 3rd grader and a 2nd grader, then you can probably choose one grade. You could choose 2nd grade, and that way you're just teaching them together for that background information, and then they can work on their own. So you might want to grade down, level down for your older student. But if there's a huge disparity between the grades, that it probably isn't a good option for you. All right, so is this curriculum right for you? Yes, it's going to be a good fit for your family if your student's okay with just that one-on-one teaching time at the beginning of the week, where they're getting that background information just once a week. That background information isn't included on the student pages, and so some of it is included on the map, but not all of it. And so if just sitting with you one-on-one and getting that teaching time once a week is fine with them, then this will work for you. It'll work very well for you if your child likes to work independently and if your child is a good reader. But if your child struggles with reading, or doesn't like to work independently, then it might not be a good fit. This will have to be a parent-led activity. And if you want to teach geography as a group with kids in different grades, if there's a big grade difference, age difference between your kids, then this might not be the right curriculum for you. My best tips for using it: have a globe and a US map with labeled states handy for sure. That's very helpful, especially the US map. If you're going to print it from the ebook, print the map pages alone so then you can hole punch them so they face the questions page, like I mentioned earlier, and keep the answer key handy. Even if you don't think you'll need it, you'll probably need it. And you know, why do that to yourself? Work smart, not unnecessarily hard. Last thing you need to know, this is one of my favorite resources because it's extremely comprehensive and grade level appropriate. So it's one of my favorite resources in general, not just when it comes to geography. It's definitely my favorite geography resource for my students because it is so comprehensive and grade level appropriate, but even in general, because I find that it's just easy to implement and we can kind of sneak it into every day, and it's not difficult to use. So those are my thoughts on the Evan-Moor Daily Geography Practice Workbooks. If you're interested in seeing more reviews like this one on homeschool curriculum or curriculum that I've used in my homeschool, then please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also, if you like this video, click the like button. That'll help me a lot. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm open to all questions, so write your questions in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.